With that, we're on to the last bill of the night, Council Bill 26. Mr. Legendre.
Bill number 26, 2012, an act adopting Plan Howard 2030 as a general plan for Howard County, Maryland for the purpose of planning for land use and land conservation and multi-year development, planning for transportation, public facilities, water, sewage, parkland, housing, human services, and environmental protection, and generally relating to planning, zoning, and land use in Howard County, Maryland.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Again, I'm Marcia McLaughlin with the Planning Department, asking for your support for Council Bill 26, which would adopt the county's next general plan, Plan Howard 2030. Plan Howard 2030 follows all of the general plan guidelines that were adopted by the County Council in July of last year. It meets county code and state of Maryland smart growth requirements, including new place designations and growth tiers. It is intended to provide a forward-looking approach to a greener and more sustainable future, environmentally, economically, and in terms of the quality of life in our communities. We worked with the General Plan Task Force in the preparation of the plan. That group held 9 meetings. We also had open houses that the Planning Board held before it held its public hearing in April of this year. The Granicus system includes the original presentation to the Planning Board as well as a presentation that was made when this bill was filed to the Council. The first shows or demonstrates what is in the plan, and the second Granicus proposal or presentation to the Council was really focusing on the differences as the plan evolved from the Planning Board to the Council. The last point I would make is that adoption of the plan does not have an immediate fiscal impact. However, the long term, since this is a 20-year plan, there are implications associated with the policies in the plan related to continuing to provide good quality public services and facilities. And so there is a fiscal analysis that is a supplement to the plan and is available on the website that looks at projected revenues and expenses to cover continuing to pay for public facilities and services. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or in the work session.
Did you, I didn't see it, and maybe you did this, did you provide the council with this fiscal analysis?
It was supposed to be sent to you, yes.
Where was,
Yeah, we got it.
Maybe
Okay, good.
Friday night, basically. Mm-hmm. The executive summary is excellent.
You were having fun on Father's Day instead of reading it. It was a smart move on your part. I think we'll...
Thank you.
We'll work further on this one, of course, at a later date, but let's let our friends who are here who have things to say about it.
Just one question. I know we received it. I've got my copy here. Is it something that you've posted online already as well?
Yes, you can get
Okay.
it
I just want to make sure
at
for the public.
planhoward.org, and I think it may be available on the council's webpage as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have quite a few, so we're going to just start and go through. I have Kathy Hudson, Howie Figge, Bridget Mugani, Paul Revelle, Richard Tufts, Theodore Mariani, Howard Johnson, Ned Tillman. I'll stop there, and then we'll keep going afterwards. But be ready. Good evening again.
And likewise. Kathy Hudson. I'll skip the niceties and go into talking about the fiscal plan that I received over the week, or I was able to find over the weekend. The plan presents 4 different scenarios. Basically, you have a medium development, and then you have a high development rate, and you have both of those in bad economic times or medium, and then really good economic times. The low development or the moderate development option does best in whether it's good or bad economic times. And so we would support the comprehensive rezoning to model the lower rate of development, not the higher rate of development as a result. We also note that the fiscal analysis that was done for the general plan only includes costs coming from the capital and operating budgets, but does not include the rapidly inflating costs of separate fees that appear on citizens' tax bills, such as the costs of water and sewer, trash collection, fire tax, and the soon-to-come stormwater tax fee. For example, citizens served by Baltimore County or Baltimore City Water have had rate increases of 9% for each of the last 4 years, with no end in sight. The contract for trash removal will come up for renegotiation next year. It's expected to have a substantial increase. The stormwater fee is actually going to pay the cost of prior inaction on the environmental costs of prior development. And the recently opened state-of-the-art ENR facility that processes our waste facilities into the Patuxent River watershed will meet the growth demand until 2020. Then we'll need to come up and pay for some other idea at some unknown cost to us all to service further growth. Thus, you might look at this, you may think by looking at this report that you're looking at rosy numbers for the county with increasing the growth, but realize that each citizen is taking a larger hit with increasing development. The other disappointment that we had in this report was that only economic figures were considered in here. Although that we know the county knows about the state's work with a genuine progress indicator, none of its ideas are incorporated in this report. Thus, we don't know the cost to Howard County when folks have longer commute and travel times, or when our air, water are further polluted, or crime increases. What are the costs or gain to us when other economic, environmental, and social indicators are taken into account? This is a report that we would like to see at the same time of the general plan, and we don't have it. We would note that in Maryland, in the last 50 years, the economic indicators from this report have shown that the economic indicators have gone up substantially, the social indicators barely up, and the environmental indicators have gone down. I would assume Howard County would be similar. As far as the general plan goes, two major changes stand out: the introduction of PUD zoning and the changes to the priority funding areas, and the commitment change in Apfo. Our primary concern centers on the details of their future implementation, and HCCA will be willing to work with the county on such future legislation. For the PUD development, the zoning, the plan unit development is being presented for the first time in Howard County. This kind of zoning can be very subjective, and it needs a lot of study and widespread community input for safeguards if it is to be seriously considered. Basically, PUD zoning gives a developer increased density in exchange for greater community enhancements. Frankly, the enhancements that are mentioned in this general plan, such as affordable housing, open space amenities, pedestrian bike connections, and environmental restoration, should be part of what's already required. If PUD zoning is to be implemented, important enhancements for the greater community need to be on one side of the equation, because increasing the density will bring an increased cost to the surrounding community. We also would ask that PUD not be a floating zone, but only be allowed in certain growth areas. This would help ensure stability and predictability in established neighborhoods. With the Apfo, the proposed Apfo chart has 1,200 units in the growth and revitalization areas. Since they're spread out over the eastern part of the county, we wonder how will the schools be able to predict capacity? What if one developer requests all the units? Won't it overwhelm the local school? How can we begin to plan for such an event? We recommend that all of the Apfo legislation be reviewed, not just the allocations chart, especially to expand the distance from the development that needs to be looked at to meet the roads test, or to place an upper limit on the number of units that can carry it over to the next year. Other criteria, such as adequate fire, police coverage, and hospitals, should also be considered. I'll stop there, and you have the rest of my testimony.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Figge.
Good evening, council members. You guys are putting in a late night. You're past my bedtime here. I'm Howie Figge, 3807 Multan Drive in Ellicott City. I'm in the RR district, and our address used to be RFD Route 2, so I go back a ways. I am asking that you not limit any farmer's ability to farm in Howard County in any district, now or in the future. The existing farms cannot be moved to a better district. We and our land are here to stay for most likely generations to come and want to do our best to exist with our neighbors. It is our nature, and most likely it is that nature that has made Howard County one of the best places to live. We also need to know that if we need to, or just desire to, change our way of life within the very large realm of agriculture, that this county will not limit us in a way that is counterproductive to us and our land. To grant that right to the RC district and not giving it to every farm in the county regardless of its location is not fair. No one that is farming in Howard County has ever been asked if we wanted development to surround us, but now we are being asked not to change so that these new residents don't have to adjust to our way of life as we have had to adjust to theirs. Is this fair? By no means is it fair, unless we are going to be compensated with a viewscape fee. You want to protect the scenic roads more than you want to protect us and our land, yet we are the scenic part of Howard County. I would also encourage you to update the right to farm laws so that we have all the rights that we need to survive in the next 20 years and beyond. If you don't, then those that say you only preserved open space will be right, and those families that farm, that are in preservation, and those that are not, are depending on you to do the right thing so that they will have a future here in Howard County. We all do what we do for the love of our land. It is our livelihood, our way of life, and above all, it is our home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Figge. Any
Have any
questions?
questions?
We'll be taking up these issues, I believe, during the environmental portion of our discussion with the general plan. Bridget Mugani?
Good evening, council members. I'm Bridget Mugani, 9250 Red Cart Court in Columbia, Maryland. I speak as an individual, but the positions that I'm going to state have been endorsed by the Howard County Citizens Association Board of Directors. I'd like first to address traffic, which is in Chapter 7 under Roads and Highways. Traffic is probably the most fundamental element in our quality of life, if you think about it. One of the magazines that rated Columbia as one of the best places to live also noted that we have traffic problems. The plan projects that the number of vehicle hours lost in traffic delays will increase by 57% by 2030. We already have serious traffic problems on state roads, particularly, as well as major arterials that are county roads. For example, on Route 20, between routes 108 and 100, there are signs saying, quote, stay alert, congested area next 3 miles. Another sign on Route 70, exiting south on Route 29, there's a similar sign. On Route 175, where I live, east going near Thunder Hill is a sign which states congested area next 4 miles. These are state roads. The state has no funds to improve them. What are we going to do? We propose that the housing allocations be limited to the level, the D level of service. That's 1 to 2 traffic lights that you wait for, mostly 1. And that is a really low level of service, but currently we could go lower than that. The Apfo regulations we suggest should require traffic studies to include the nearest major 2 intersections, and that one of them be the nearest state road or interchange. That greatly expands the area that must be considered so that state roads will become part of our planning, not just the nearest major collectors, which are basically neighborhood roads. The other subject I'd like to address is transit services. I'd like to say that the central role given to the Howard County transit system is very, very welcome. Councilmember Terrassa, I know, has supported this. We both worked on this problem in the past, And the riders are basically the economic disadvantaged. I would just very quickly say we would like to ask for transit shelters or seating at all bus stops, and also that bus rapid transit be considered for commuters.
Ms. Mugani, thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure that you have written testimony for us, correct?
do,
Great.
yes.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Paul Revelle, Richard Tufts.
Paul Revelle, 7017 Meandering Streamway in Fulton, Maryland. I'm here with the Howard County Independent Business Association, but Nicole Galvin, who will speak shortly, I hope, will be representing the group. I just wanted to add a couple of things to what I anticipate she'll be saying. Most of my testimony is focused on two areas of the general plan, the Snowden River Parkway and Route 1 areas. The Howard County Independent Business Association came into being because of some recently proposed development activities, including one in the Snowden River Parkway corridor, which threatens to add gas stations, service bays, a convenience store, and strip retail to what has been, for quite a long while, industrially zoned land. Not only would these land uses be a further erosion of the county's industrial land base, but they would also fly in the face of the highest and best use concept for properties in the corridor. And they're Exhibit A for what happens when the master developer's economic self-interest is no longer tied to the commercial success of developed properties. It's hard to imagine the Class A office campus envisioned by the RCL-CO study in the context of the spreading strip retail on the Snowden River Parkway. HCIBA believes that the implementation action in Policy 10.6, which says to improve the competitiveness and design of commercial areas, they believe it should be given real teeth in the comprehensive zoning review so that the ongoing policy of not extending strip commercial development on major roads is strengthened. This is especially so in Columbia, where the village centers face additional economic pressure from the internet, from Wegmans, from ongoing retail conversion of land zoned for commercial uses. Policy 5.4 addresses revitalizing the Route 1 corridor, and among the implementing actions is a recommended zoning review of the CE, CAC, and TOD zones combined with a more flexible approach for commercial uses. HCIBA supports that review and recognizes that the successes of multifamily residential development in CAC were offset somewhat by the failures of the first floor retail in CAC, and that's part of the natural redevelopment learning process. We urge that the corridor not be allowed to return to its gas station, convenience store, car-focused past from any future zoning review. HCIBA also supports Policy 5.4C, which encourages residential development in the Route 1 corridor that does not erode opportunities to preserve or redevelop employment areas. This echoes that same concern about the spreading retail in the Snowden River Parkway corridor. The draft general plan cites the EDA strategic plan as identifying 4 themes to describe Howard County business community. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Revelle. Mr. Fox.
Thank you for your testimony. I share your concern. Hopefully you got a chance to also look at the jobs to housing ratios in the general plan that may concern you as well.
I did see that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tufts. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Richard Tufts. I live at 2830 Duval Road in Daisy. My testimony tonight will be as an individual because there will be testimony by the leader of an advocacy group, Mr. Fred Dorsey. I am testifying as a member of an advocacy group working to bring a historic preservation plan to the citizens of Howard County. I am also a board member of the Concerned Citizens of Western Howard County, which strongly supports such a plan. 10 months ago, our advocacy group began working to develop the framework for a historic preservation plan. we reviewed similar plans from a number of counties throughout Maryland. Earlier, Mr. Legendre kindly sent you excerpts from these plans. We also reviewed those areas from the proposed general plan pertaining to historic preservation and found them limited. Last July, after we requested the council change old, outdated language in the proposed general plan guidelines, you resolved to evaluate the need to create a historic plan. Members of our ad hoc group and others then testified before the planning board, and others in April of this year, and again requested language be changed from evaluate to create. The board unanimously agreed and recommended this change to you. Yet the language in the proposed general plan still suggests an evaluation. We feel the need to get past evaluating and get on with creating a historic preservation plan. To accomplish this, our group has developed a comprehensive set of guidelines for a historic plan, which my colleague Fred Dorsey will submit later this evening. We respectfully request your serious consideration and subsequent endorsement of a historic preservation plan for Howard County beyond what is in the proposed general plan. Our historic preservation group appreciates the county's invitation to work together and offers our support to Ms. McLaughlin and her team. Howard County should not have a historic preservation plan because other counties have them, but because Howard County needs one to protect its valuable historic resources. We urge the county to do this, and we stand ready to assist this effort. Finally, I would like to comment on the issue of scenic roads, with due respect to Mr. Figge. The proposed general plan calls for reviewing the county's designated scenic roads regulations. I agree. Regulations should be reviewed, but to provide more enforcement, not threaten those roads which currently listed in the scenic roads inventory. Please do not threaten our scenic roads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tufts. Any questions? Nope. Thank you, sir. Mr. Mariani, then followed by Howard Johnson, Ned Tillman, Tom Meacham, Allison Carney, and Walter Carson is out of town.
Good evening. Once again, I'm a substitute speaker for Mr. Carson, our president, the concerned citizens of Western Howard County. We'd like to express our appreciation for the outstanding effort made by all those who participated in the general plan process. The general plan task force members that met for the better part of a year, their work leading to a draft plan, the planning board that held 3 open houses about the county and its hearing and open work sessions, and the fine work done by the Department of Planning and Zoning in bringing together the final document. To these citizens that gave their time and talent and those supporting public servants, we say thank you. Second, while the plan is many-faceted and contains much to be complimented, concerned citizens believe that 6 particular elements deserve to be singled out for some praise and some discussion. First, the plan differentiates the way that commercial zoning districts are applied in the non-planned service area from such districts in the planned service area. Since the non-planned service areas, the RC and RR zones, do not have sewer and water, they are unable to support many uses that are allowed in the B1 and B2 districts in the east. We are persuaded that moving high-intensity uses from the B1 and B2 zones where the property is located in the non-planned service area and not served by public sewer and water is essential to preserving the quality of life in such RC and RR zones in rural western Howard County. Second, those of us who were involved in reviewing the plan look carefully at the range and extent of conditional uses currently permitted in the RC and RR zones. This sensitivity to the unique nature of the rural West is essential in maintaining the integrity of the rural environment. Concerned citizens have worked closely with the Greater Highland Association on this conditional use matter and have offered a number of recommendations to the Department of Planning and Zoning in this regard. We trust the Council will endorse this joint effort between Greater Highland and concerned citizens, and that the recommended amendments to the conditional uses will find their way into the final regulations. Third, we're particularly pleased with the recommendation to use agricultural preservation funds in new and innovative ways that will support farming. Such an approach is commendable. We strongly support the use of such funds for study grants and low-interest loan programs that will expand agricultural enterprises and lead to value-added initiatives and innovative niche farming activities. Concerned citizens believe agricultural industry is a key part of our unique way of life in western Howard County. That industry must be protected and enhanced to ensure the long-term survival of farming in our community. Fourth, we are pleased with the plan's commitment to the preservation of this county's historic heritage. Preservation of the past is a key to the success of our future. Support for protection of historic properties, including restrictions on negative intrusions, including insensitive commercial activities such as cell towers, is critical if this heritage is to be protected. Giving lip service to historic preservation is not enough. There must be a legal basis on which protection can rest. We cannot afford to lose the precious legacy that belongs to this county. A renewed emphasis is needed, as well as the legal tools to implement preservation efforts. We applaud the county's continued commitment to scenic roads and vistas, and I believe Mr. Tufts has spoken eloquently on that. We acknowledge the existence of new state mandate on development in the Tier 4 areas of western Howard County. This is primarily the RC zone, which I live. These mandates will greatly restrict the construction of new housing in the west. There are two consequences of this state-imposed mandate. First, housing will become even more expensive and less available to modest-income workers. Secondly, landowners will be severely impacted by likely diminution of land values, especially on large, undeveloped farms. The county may wish to address this complication in two ways. It can amend and extend the DEO to allow transfer of development rights from impacted farms to the eastern section of the county into what I call the smart growth area. This would provide financial relief for those impacted. The county can also allow undeveloped and underdeveloped commercial sites in the non-planned service area to be converted to or developed as modest-priced housing to accommodate Howard County workforce. I thank you for considering the comments of the concerned citizens of western Howard County, and I pose a question. Assuming the plan is adopted, what will become of it? We place our trust in you, our elected officials and representatives, that you will find tools and with will to mold these lofty goals into a concrete reality for the citizens of Howard County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Mariani?
Questions?
Thank you very much. Howard Johnson?
To finish my time, could I give this to Mr. Kornreich? You have my written testimony?
He can come at the end.
Well, no, I'm on the list somewhere.
Yes. So, yes, I noted that you had given us your written testimony before. Thank you very much. Okay, Ned Tillman?
Good evening. My name is Ned Tillman. I live on the Lake Elkhorn watershed. I had the honor to serve as the chairman of the General Plan Task Force, and I notice a number of our members are here tonight. I like to stay at 30,000 feet in our discussion. I'd just like to point out that we did have 36 different people on the task force. The majority came to most meetings. We lasted about a year, and it was really interesting, the broad range of expertise on that task force. Everybody knew something to a great bit of detail, though not many of us knew at all, so it was a very good process for us to go through. I think along the way, and I've reread the general plan recently, it seems like the general plan really has been successful as it is today, showing us how complex the planning process has become with the great increase in numbers of people that live in this area. And with the wide range of interests they all have. I think it also was successful from the perspective of the strong need to balance these interests, and also the great interconnectedness between the commercial and non-commercial interests in the county. I believe the way the DPC set it up, trying to deal with balancing these interests under the rubric of sustainability, was probably a good way to go, though I think a very challenging way to go. I mean, sustainability is very easy in the business side of the world, where, you know, sustainability is a systematic, strategic process that businesses can follow. I mean, business is always about sustainability. I mean, most businesses that fail just don't get it. But when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people in a county situation, the complexity is much greater. And I think the sustainability rubric that we followed really helped us to try to balance these various interests. I think the challenge we now face as a community is not just finalizing this general plan and adopting it. I think the challenge really is getting all of us to read it. I mean, it's 150 to 200 pages long. There's a lot of information in there. I know you all will read it, but I think all the citizens really need to read it too. I think it should become a requirement in high schools, you know, that people study it. I think that people that come before you in the future should have it in their back pocket so we can refer to some of these lofty goals in pursuing a better future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Tom Meacham? Come on, you folks are not doing very well at getting on the on-deck circle, all right? Getting in the on-deck circle. So, it's Tom Meacham, it's Allison Carney, it's Kisa Bruce, Jackie Eng, Fred Dorsey, and Dan O'Leary. So, if I called your name, you can kind of move forward, so you're ready.
I'd like to talk about affordable housing. 12 years ago, the general plan talked about affordable housing, and 12 years later, we're still talking about the need for affordable housing. In one of the sections of the general plan, it talks about a range of affordable options, and it discusses concepts. I want to discuss those concepts and talk about a little detail. I do want to say the housing community development has done a good work and has plans to do good work in the future in this area, but it cannot be expected to do that work on its own. There has to be a contribution from the private sector also. And as Plan Howard notes, there's a limited supply of land available in the county to provide that kind of housing, which of course makes it very expensive. One way to provide more opportunities for affordable housing would be the example of the concept of age-restricted adult housing, for example, but better than what's being done in that vein right now. The greater density that's mentioned in the range of affordable options is present in the age-restricted. There's a variety of housing types that are available under age-restricted. It can include the greater buffering aspect that's mentioned, but I think one of the important things is that this type of proposal would have all affordable housing. It wouldn't just be 10%, 11%, 15%. It needs to all be affordable. I'd suggest that as part of that, you would delete the large open space requirements. You would use reasonable setbacks from adjacent properties, and you would not include the potentially self-defeating requirement that the project be compatible with development in the vicinity, especially since compatible and vicinity are extremely subjective terms. The private sector has a longer and greater history providing affordable housing than even government does, and I think that in order to bring about this public policy, and we're not talking about this 12 or 10 years from now again, that the tools be given to the private sector through the general plan and then eventually the zoning regulations to allow it to provide this kind of contribution to affordable housing and getting it done. The other aspect I want to talk about is noted on page 130 under that range again. Very specifically, it talks about accessory apartments. The one problem with accessory apartments is that they're limited to being inside the owner-occupied dwelling. I think to increase affordable housing options, that it should be considered to allow apartments on separate buildings on owner-occupied land. There could still be a limitation on space and any other limitations that are deemed appropriate for apartments, but I think this is another way of providing the affordable housing we talk about without it necessarily being in large projects. I'll conclude with that, and I'll submit the rest in written testimony. Thank you very much.
We appreciate that, Mr. Meacham. Mr. Fox?
Yeah, Mr. Meacham?
Sorry.
Can you possibly get together with some of the other land use attorneys around here and maybe get a consistent view on what's going on in the age-restricted market, since depending upon which week it is, we hear it's either viable or not viable, depending on which way everybody's trying to go?
Well, actually, I don't think I expressed an opinion about the age-restricted zoning. I think I discussed that as a model for affordable housing.
Okay. All right.
Also, in whatever you sent us in testimony, if you could elaborate on the accessory apartments, on how you would propose that we regulate the cars that go with the accessory apartments. Because I think that's more of the challenge, the cars and the parking, than the actual building being separate.
Okay, I will.
In many of our neighborhoods. So
Great, thank you.
How do we handle that?
Thank you. If nothing else, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meacham. Allison Carney? Good evening.
Good evening. Allison Carney, Howard County League of Women Voters, Chairperson Sigourney, and members of the council. The League is here to testify in general support of the general plan. There are several exceptions. I will leave you with the written testimony. I did want to address the exceptions. The one thing that several members expressed was they would have liked to have been able to review the fiscal notes along with the general plan because it was quite lengthy, and we were disappointed that we were not able to review them. Under the land preservation, we ask that you note the League's position on agriculture as the preferred land use in the rural areas of the county. We'd also like to request that you incorporate a proposal for a historic preservation plan for the county as a whole in respect to the historic sites for the county. We were in support of the simplification of the housing allocation chart. That was very useful. The League requests that you incorporate in the general plan for the recreation and parks specific language concerning the pathways owned by the county and also the Columbia Association. Currently, Columbia has 94 miles of pathway, and the county has 88 miles, and we'd like to see that in there as well. The county also the League feels strongly about the need to address the homeless population in support of the housing portion of the plan, and any recommendations regarding homelessness prevention. As the League has commented in the past, we would like to see, as part of the Plan Howard 2030, the formation of a housing trust to be incorporated into to the plan to ensure that the needs of all residents, both current and future, are met. Foundation could annually make decisions regarding the needs of this population based on existing market conditions and using established affordability index. And last, we give our conditional support to the monitoring of Plan Howard 2030. We ask for an amendment to require in Section 11.1 that the Planning Board hold a public meeting on monitoring reports and send the Planning Board comments to the County Council for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thanks very much. Keisa Bruce? Jackie Eng, Fred Dorsey, Dan O'Leary. I see we're getting into the on-deck circle.
Good evening. My name is Keisa Bruce. I'm here on behalf of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce, and we support Council Bill 26. I'm going to keep my comments brief in the interest of time. I would just like to thank the council for incorporating the fiscal impact study, which we requested in our previous testimony when we came before the council last year. We requested that a fiscal impact analysis be part of the general plan process, and we want to thank you for that, and the Department of Planning and Zoning for producing that report, and we support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fox.
And just, we'll look forward to hearing your comments on it once you have a chance to review it. I'm sure you haven't yet since we just got it.
Yes.
So.
Thank you.
Good
Hi
evening
again,
again.
Jackie Yang, and I come from the on-deck circle to the plate on behalf of the Association of Community Services. Let me again express our appreciation for the work that's evidenced in the comprehensive and forward-thinking Plan Howard 2030. A few comments from the Human Services perspective. We are fully supportive of the workforce development strategy that recognizes the need in our community for service and entry-level workers, diverse housing, commuting options, and transportation and health care necessary to support Howard County in the 21st century as a leader of entrepreneurship, information technology, and cybersecurity. We're heartened that that considerable attention is paid in the report to enhance the existing transit service. We understand the need to expand regional multi-jurisdictional solutions to achieve connectivity for long-distance commuters. We would encourage, however, an additional implementing action that addresses the need for enhanced accessibility and quality of transit services within Columbia and the Route 40 and Route 1 corridors. This is where a majority of low-income wage earners currently and most likely will increasingly live, and therefore require better access to affordable, reliable, and efficient public transportation so that they can access services, get to their jobs, and get their children to daycare and deal with the day-to-day living. ACS and its members are particularly supportive of collaborative development among government, nonprofit, and funding communities of data-driven, measurable plans for health services and human services. The capacity building action is notable as it recognizes that it's a community-wide responsibility to ensure the well-being of its interests, and the nonprofit community stands ready to participate. We appreciate recognition in the housing section of the draft of in the legislation of the benefits of mixed income and mixed-use communities. We would encourage, however, inclusion of defining more precisely the term low income to clarify persons earning 35 to 55% of median income. The call to include increased regulatory flexibility and institution of density and other incentives will be critical to expanding housing for residents at diverse income and life stage levels. In closing, we applaud recognition in the legislation that the availability of affordable housing is the critical linchpin to keeping individuals and families in their homes and ending homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything? Good evening, Mr. Dorsey.
Good evening, council members. Tonight I have a much greater appreciation for your stamina and attentiveness. My name is Fred Dorsey. I live at 10774 Judy Lane in Columbia, Maryland. I'm president of Preservation Howard County, and for the past 10 months I've worked as a part of an advocacy group to create a unified vision of a successful Howard County historic preservation plan. The advocacy group is comprised of experienced individual community advocates: Betsy Grader, co-president, League of Women Voters; Grace Kabasic; Mary Catherine Cochran, founder and past president of Preservation Howard County; Lisa Wengate, member of Patapsco Heritage Greenway and a preservation consultant; Ann Jones, past president, Howard County Conservancy; Kathy Hudson, environmental and land preservationist; Barbara Kellner, Columbia Archives; Dick Tufts, board member of Concerned Citizens of Western Howard County; and Ed Lilly, President of Ellicott City Restoration Foundation. We believe that the general plan as it stands will not provide for the successful creation of a county-wide historic preservation plan for the following three reasons. The language in the general plan does not require the creation of a historic preservation plan, despite the council's and the planning board's direction to do so. The general plan has no deadline in place for the implementation of a historic preservation plan, and thus the goal is not measurable. The narrow action items included in the general plan limit the scope of how a historic preservation plan could and should evolve. Our advocacy group presents to you tonight our final product, Guidelines for the Development of a Historic Preservation Plan. These guidelines have been endorsed by each member of our group, as well as the Howard County Conservancy, Preservation Howard County, Patapsco Heritage Greenway, Upper Patuxent Archaeology Group, and Preservation Maryland. The guidelines were developed in the context of best practices in place in other Maryland jurisdictions, specifically Baltimore, Cecil, Charles, Frederick, Hartford, Kent, Prince George's, St. Mary's, Talbot, and Wicomico counties. Our group reviewed these plans to identify the best elements for Howard County. We recognize the limitation of administration funding and staffing, and we wish to eliminate these barriers to success. Our advocacy group is willing to convene as a committee to work with the County Council and the Department of Planning and Zoning to ensure that these guidelines presented to you tonight become the framework to a successful historic preservation plan with a specific period of time. Additionally, we offer our collective assistance to the county to help identify grant and funding sources to make the historic preservation plan a reality. I call upon other organizations in the historic preservation community to actively join this effort and to communicate their support to the County Council and the Department of Planning and Zoning. I appreciate your time and your patience this evening.
Quick question, Mr. Dorsey. Based on the last general plan and the way that it treated historic preservation, did you expect that this type of plan that you've created in the last 8 months would have already happened based on the language that was in the last general plan?
Absolutely.
Okay, so is your effort to create this an effort to make sure that there is some teeth in the historic preservation language for the current general plan so that we don't go another 10 years without a plan actually taking place?
Yes, as it relates to the 2000 general plan, Preservation Howard County as an organization had offered volunteer assistance and the search for funding, and that offer still stands today.
Okay. Good, thank you. All right, Dan O'Leary, followed by Sherman Howell. Mark Norman did not turn up. Brian Meshkin left. Okay, hold on. So Dan O'Leary, Sherman Howell, Robert Buckmeyer, and Brenda Stewart. Is not here. Okay, so that's, all right, Mr. O'Leary, good evening.
All right, I am Dan O'Leary, and this time I am speaking for the Greater Highlands Crossroads Association, so I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes if it takes that long. The Greater Highlands Association has been in existence for 10 years. We averaged about 85 members over the last 3 years and 85 to 100 over the 10-year period. And that's a sizable portion of the Highland area. It only has 1,100 addresses in the zip code. We also include parts of Highland and Fulton, which would be another 900. So we're around 5% of the area that we think we represent. I'm only going to comment on the issues and the sections I'm familiar with, focusing on the West. And I only have 5 minutes. It's a big plan. Commenting on the rural zoning and development regulations section, which is about at page 32, it states, "To further the interests of farmers and residents, greater distinctions need to be made between the RC and the RR zoning district, so regulations governing each district are consistent with their stated purposes. The goal would be to balance the various interests of multiple stakeholders in the West. Plan Howard does not propose any change to zoning densities or significant amendments to regulations governing residential subdivision. However, improvements in the design of new residential developments would help reduce potential conflicts are being proposed as detailed below." And we agree with those statements. It recommends better buffers. Amend the subdivision regulations to require fencing, a landscape buffer, or a non-buildable preservation parcel between cluster lots and adjoining agricultural properties. I believe previous drafts also included a phrase that said something like, "There's also a need to strengthen the cluster provisions to produce good results." We support these concepts because they will allow changes to the cluster provisions during the comprehensive rezoning process, which might produce better and more attractive development. To produce this result, more teeth must be included in the requirements for cluster subdivisions, including a role perhaps for a design, the design review panel. It doesn't have that in there. Talking about the review of agricultural and commercial uses in the rural West, it states that the vast majority of the land is either RC or RR. There is also a very small amount of commercially zoned land in the rural West. I was really surprised by this. There are only 254 acres of commercial land in the rural West. There are 94,400 total acres out there. Now, in addition to that, there's 32 acres of industrial, but you can see how small that is. I was also served as the co-chair of the Rural West Advisory Committee, and that's quoted extensively in this section, and I'm going to try to quote quickly a couple of the things that they found. It reiterates the point about there isn't currently enough significant difference between the uses in the RR and the RC zone, and they have different purposes. The essential purpose of the RC zone is to conserve farmland and to encourage agricultural activities. The purpose of the RR, really, is to allow low-density residential development within a rural environment. They are somewhat in conflict. And they're also in conflict with this concept of the transfer of DEO rights from the RC to the RR. We heartily support the suggestion made by Mr. Mariani, and I believe others will go on this, to allow importation of DEO to other areas of Howard County, including the smart growth areas. That'll take the pressure off us in the RR zone. Currently, we are the dumping grounds for that. Now, I say that because we've seen a very, very heavy use of DEO in the RR zone. It needs to go other places as well. The committee also expressed a wide range of opinion as to the proper level of development intensity on commercial parcels. The general plan further in that section goes on to say a thorough review of the zoning regulations during comp zoning should take into account all of the permitted by right, permitted by permit, permitted by conditional use structure to see if they need an overhaul. The uses themselves should also be reviewed to determine if there are additional uses that could be added, as there are some uses that are no longer relevant and could be deleted. The county anticipates and desires the continued rural involvement of the Rural West Advisory Committee. I commit myself and a couple of others. We'll go on that. I guess, did I get 5 minutes?
Yes, you did.
All right. Well, I've got some more stuff in here, and I'll put it in writing and follow it up with
Exactly.
an email.
And Mr. O'Leary, it really does help as we're looking at very specific recommendations that you're making or others are making that are left to speak with us, for us to have them in writing, because then we can sit down and actually put them out on a table and start working with them. So we appreciate your time and the effort that you would put to writing will be well spent.
Could you tell, for my information and others, how much time do we have to get this in? Is there a window that's going to close on comments?
No, not until we vote it.
Okay.
We'll be starting our work sessions on Thursday, so, the sooner you can get it to us, the more time we'll have to work with it. But we take comments up until the point at which we actually vote it.
We like notice, too.
One more quick question. What are the rules on work session? Do we just come and watch, or we might be invited to say something?
You could. At this point, we will be certainly inviting people to come on the issues that they care about and trying to work through and understand the different parts of the general plan from different perspectives.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give this in now, and I may follow it up with more comments.
Great. Thank you so much. Mr. Howell found...
Yes, Sherman Howell, of African American Coalition of Howard County, speaking for Reverend Robert A.F. Turner. Just one comment, and we'll send the rest in to you versus going through all this stuff. And this is a deep concern of Reverend Turner because we have the church there in Long Reach, and we have problems there in the Long Reach Village Center. And he sees those problems as being caused by putting too many poor people in one area. So one thing he asked to be put in our comments is that unplanned service area, meaning those areas that currently don't have water and sewer, should be modified as such to provide a full spectrum of housing for all persons and families within all income ranges. The unplanned, that's what we call the unplanned service area. And again, one of the things that he has in mind is that this would take pressure off of Columbia and Eastern Howard County. And also, in talking with some of the school board members, they are saying one of the main reasons we have this academic gap is because we are putting too many free and reduced lunch families into the same area. And finally, it is, again, his opinion, the African American Coalition opinion, that the Long Reach incident could be reproduced unless we disperse some of the families with economic challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We look forward to the rest of your testimony. Mr. Buckmeyer, followed by, let's see, Brenda Stewart was not here, Mary Catherine Cochran is not here, Linda Spencer, if you would be ready, and Rusty Toller. Rusty, you still here? And then Nicole Galvin.
I'm Robert Buckmeyer, President of Bridges Board. I live at 10557 Tolling Clock Way in Columbia, and on behalf of the staff and Board of Directors of Bridges to Housing Stability, I'm presenting our thoughts and comments on Plan Howard 2030, especially how it addresses Bridges and the clients it serves. In the testimony I'm going to give, I'm just going to read parts of what I shared with you and make some other comments. Having followed the county's housing policies over many years, we are very pleased to see how fully and realistic the housing chapter acknowledged the central problem of affordable housing in Howard County, that is, the high cost of housing. Bridges' story starts with preventing the spiral of homelessness for at-risk households. That is our work. What we have found is that we can't keep households out of risk without housing that they can't afford. Bridges assists workers whose families are homeless, but we prefer to intervene to keep them in housing to prevent homelessness. Bridges clients are working poor families, often on the precipice of becoming homeless or recently having dropped into homelessness. While the cause of their problems may vary from client to client, the solution almost always involves finding alternative housing that fits within their budget, usually at the low or very low end of the wage spectrum. And here I'm going to interrupt my written testimony. On the last page of the testimony, I have shared with you a listing of the employment of our clients on April 15th. And it's a surprising list. It includes many people that we depend on a daily basis for the life that we live here in Howard County. These people need to have housing. And now I'm going to move to the bottom of the section. Over the next few years, at least $400 million will be invested in affordable housing in the county. Almost all of it by private developers as part of the MIHU program, and most of it in the Route 1 corridor as rental apartments. With that much opportunity just ahead of us, and with our single mom client in mind, and in keeping with the continued county support for zoning and density flexibility found in the policies and implementation actions of the general plan, we suggest the following. Number one, determine the actual housing demand for county residents living with disabilities. We are delighted to see that Plan Howard makes this very point in the policy discussion, but it doesn't appear in the implementation actions. I wish to emphasize this point very strongly. We need to have good evidence of goals and progress on meeting the needs of affordable housing. Number two, take a closer look at the range of affordable housing needs in the county and devise a policy aimed at matching demographic income with housing stock. For example, if 25% of the population makes less than a certain amount, but only 15% of the housing stock is affordable to them, then perhaps more emphasis should be given to income-targeted housing. Number three, consider affordable housing as a community-wide private infrastructure need in the same way that we all need roads, fire stations, schools, libraries, and parks. Number four, consider formalizing the Carbo scale. And this is the scale that moves MIHU down to lower levels of housing income. And number five, formally adopt the plan to end homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckmeyer. Any questions? Thank you. All right, Linda Spencer? No. Followed by Rusty Toller, followed by Nicole Galvin.
Good evening, I'm Linda Spencer, and I come from the Turf Valley Road community. I live at 2634 Turf Valley Road in Ellicott City. Looking at the Plan Howard 2030, I was studying Chapter 10, the community design, and I have concerns based on experience as a resident of Turf Valley Road. I've lived on Turf Valley Road for almost 19 years, and I've seen many changes in the character of our neighborhood that have adversely impacted our quality of life. I see nothing in Plan Howard 2030 that increases my confidence in Howard County's true interest in addressing legitimate needs of existing neighborhoods in a meaningful way. On page 138 of Plan Howard, I read, balancing the management of new growth with the concerns of established communities is an important challenge. Yes, the challenges of new growth are critical importance to established communities. In my experience, though, from the perspective of the Howard County government, the important challenge appears to be in how to work around the concerns of the established communities in order to assure that new growth will occur. I also read, the county needs to identify ways to preserve the existing character of established neighborhoods while accommodating some continuing growth. The residents of Turf Valley Road have appealed repeatedly to Howard County government at multiple levels. We have mounted 2 unsuccessful formal appeals in an effort to preserve the existing character of our 50-year-old neighborhood of 22 homes.
Yet every entity to which we have appealed has seen fit to confirm that the developer of the Turf Valley Newtown development has every right to use our street as one of only 2 avenues in and out of his new development. Regardless of what is written in Plan Howard 2030 or any previous county documents, I see no evidence that our neighborhood is regarded as anything other than a pass-through that will permit easy access to newer residential and commercial development. Regulations that residents think govern basic design standards are routinely ignored. Roads designed to carry specific maximum vehicle numbers are conveniently found to be able to carry multiples of the designated maximum daily volumes, particularly if such reconfiguration of the regulations will allow more cars to travel through older areas into newer areas. For example, Resort Road is slated to become redesignated as a minor collector, though it does not meet the design standards. Our neighborhood has repeatedly asked the county to identify at least one more way for traffic to enter and leave the new development. Our appeals have been completely unproductive. It appears that nobody wants the increased traffic flow. The developer has a private road that connects directly to the new development, but he refuses to dedicate it for public use because he doesn't want the traffic either. On February 20th of the current year, and there are photographs in my handout to illustrate what I was about to say. Thank you very much for your time.
And your contact information is here, so if we have further questions, we can get back to you.
The address is here. If you need email address or phone number, I'd be happy to supply that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rusty Toller of 7421 Swan Point Way. My testimony tonight will be about something we've all done tonight. We have all aged significantly, as a matter of fact. My testimony does reflect that of also Paul Verchinsky of 5475 Sleeping Dog Lane. He is the chair of the CA Senior Advisory Committee. I'm the vice chair, but the comments do not reflect the committee. Our comments were in a May 23rd letter that we wrote to our delegates, Calvin and Jen, and we've given that to you for the record. I was on the 2000 General Plan Task Force. I think it did a good job of recognizing some of the upcoming age wave. We put in the age-qualified housing regulations. We did put universal design features within those homes. But the wave is here. Just last week, DPZ has provided some of this information. From 2001 to 2010, the county's 65-plus population rose 57% to nearly 30,000 people. Even more important, or even more impressive, however you want to look at it, from 2010 to 2030, the over 65 population is going to raise to 65,000. That's 20% of the population, and that virtually accounts for all of the county's population growth in the next 20 years. While this increase was expected, what was less expected was the economic recession. This has severely impacted the resources of our older adults, making it more likely that they're going to have to stay in their homes. We're kind of all stuck with each other. And unfortunately, this new economic reality makes it less likely that our children and grandchildren will be able to provide support to us, and that even younger people will be able to move into the county. And I think that's something you really, really need to look at. We don't think the plan really looks at that much, but we're not worried about that. We focused on the implementation of the plan. We think it's very detailed and has potential. Our letter outlines about 40 areas that mostly impact seniors. 3 of particular concern. Number 1 is transportation. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Number 2 is infrastructure and planning. It provides for a regular review of county agencies to address changing demographics. That's a great idea. We also call attention to some things that people have talked about tonight: workforce development, both at Howard County Community College and the private sector, to provide careers relating to maintaining the health, wellness, and caring of us older adults. Developing this skilled workforce is necessary, and these jobs can't be outsourced. Housing options, aging in place, strengthen the capacity of the Office on Aging to conduct and facilitate proactive home modification assessments. We also recommend that the council give serious consideration to tax release or other incentives for such modifications. And it's our understanding that the counties were provided this authority in state legislation sponsored by Delegate Gazzoni several years ago. I also gave you a copy. Oh, I'm done.
You did supply us a copy that, to Mr. Legendre, he's going to make copies for us, correct? Great, thank you. Nicole Galvin, followed by Stuart Cohn, then by Chris Singleton.
Good evening, almost morning. My name is Nicole Galvin. I'm an attorney in Baltimore. I represent the Howard County Independent Business Association. Their board of directors met, passed a resolution authorizing me to speak on their behalf and to address issues that are important to them. They comprise a multitude of different types of businesses in Howard County and throughout the state of Maryland. In going over Plan Howard 2030, one of the initial comments was to request that policy 10.4 add a provision for updating the conditional use regulations, and in particular with respect to the gasoline service station definition. The gasoline service station industry over the past decade has made tremendous changes, and the realities of modern gasoline stations are not reflected in the existing regulations. We'd ask that you look at that, and we'd be happy to work with you on coming up with some updated legislation. The second issue is Policy 5.6 on page 57 to 58 of the plan. That policy is the result of a study looking in particular at the Snowden River Parkway area. That area is part of the Newtown district, and we would propose that for any policies and regulations be put forth and implemented, that there be a look at revising the Newtown zoning regulations and appointing a new gatekeeper for Columbia. You cannot propose changes in the Newtown district without looking at Columbia as a whole. Columbia was developed through the approval of final development plans that allowed HRD, Howard Research and Development, the gatekeeper, to tailor the zoning to the property and to take into consideration other uses in the area, proposed traffic, residential, and other issues that need to be addressed. HRD controlled the development of property by carefully identifying the uses and by imposing restrictive covenants on land. HRD granted exclusivity for particular businesses by imposing covenants on nearby properties. This allowed HRD to promote business in the village centers, which is important to everyone in Columbia, and to attract businesses to Columbia with the promise of predictable development controlled by HRD. Although HRD has zoning authority, they do not have the authority to approve anything. As a practical matter, the developers would approach HRD, seek approval, and proceed with development. However, things are changing. As HRD's interest in land in Columbia has diminished, so has their control and their gatekeeping function. As a result, we are seeing problems that have been created by no gatekeeper in Columbia. HRD is not interested anymore. Developers no longer seek their blessing and instead are submitting plans for approval to the Department of Planning and Zoning. The Department of Planning and Zoning is left to determine whether a use is permitted under final development plans that sometimes contain language that is 40 years old. We've seen this firsthand, and we've seen that they're having difficulty in interpreting that, which is leading to development that may not have been contemplated 40 years ago, might be inconsistent with restrictive covenants, which are not things that can be taken into consideration by the Department of Planning and Zoning. This is creating a problem, and especially for the business owners that I represent who have invested large amounts of money in buying commercial properties only to find themselves across the street from something that never was contemplated and may or may not be permitted depending on how the 40-year-old language is interpreted. HRD is not interested in participating in the process. Somebody needs to. Final development plans cannot be changed unless HRD, the developer, participates. It's a problem. It needs to be looked at, and there needs to be guidance so there can go back to being a predictable Columbia that has a general plan that protects all businesses and residents alike. The proposed Policy 5.6 deals with what I believe will be the next issue that you face, and that's going to be the redevelopment of Columbia. Redeveloping properties, which is exactly what 5.6 is about. It deals with redeveloping the Snowden River Parkway. you can't piecemeal redevelop Columbia. It is a planned community overall. It was intended for the gatekeeper to handle what uses are done in what area. I would suggest that before we do move forward with any changes and any new policies for Snowden River Parkway or any aspect of Columbia, that we come up with updated regulations under the Newtown zoning, which the Department of Planning and Zoning have admitted on their own don't really contemplate changes under amended final development plans. I would also suggest that in the interim, that there be strict adherence to final development plans, and that there be consideration of the restrictive covenants on properties, so we don't end up with inconsistent development in Columbia during the interim.
Thank you very much.
Everybody, I apologize. I will catch the rest of this online on Grammicus. I got to drive to Central PA tonight for an early morning meeting, so I do apologize.
Drive safely.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohn.
Is a handout.
Okay, great.
Let me be the first to say, according to this clock, good morning. That clock is off, maybe. My name is Stuart Cohn. I'm a vice president of the HCCA, but I'm speaking as an individual tonight.
No, okay.
The handout that you received, the first and second page are some observations I've made and suggested improvements, and the last page that you have, the third page, is a proposed content changes for Plan 2030. There's a letter on the second in the Plan Howard 2030, second paragraph by the county exec that says, I'm pleased to present this revised draft of the Plan 2030 for consideration. And then it says, the draft incorporates much of what community members have said in response to the preliminary draft as recommended by the planning board. The problem is that I see that we met with the planning board on April 18th, and unfortunately, the planning board recommendations are not anywhere on the website. And I know there's 7 pages there, and the reason I know there's 7 pages is because a friend of a friend got a hold of a email that was an internal memorandum from the planning board, and I do have it. I'm glad I had it. I had it a couple days ago, but I don't think the public knows what the planning board recommended. And I find that to be not good. And speaking of planning board, on another subject, I like to see the website updated so it shows the planning board in there. You keyed on the one way you can get it, you key on do a Google or a search on planning board. If you go to your site, county council, there's a tab that says board, and it lists the number of boards, but it doesn't list the planning board. So I'd like to see that changed, if we can. Okay, second thing is, Bridget Margoni hit on this, and about the welcome signs in Howard County that says safety alert, congested area next 3 miles or next 4 miles. I've got to say, that's a reflection on the General Plan 2000. And my question is, will Plan 2030 help this situation? Because otherwise, to me, it looks like it's very poor strategic planning. The other thing is, third thing I'm saying to you guys, is that is the general plan, is this really enforceable or not? The only thing enforceable to me really is in Apfo, you got roads and schools. But infrastructure, as you all know, is a lot more than that, such as health and services, water and sewage, electricity, fire, police, EMS. So I have a proposal. I'd like to see consideration as a task force in Howard County that looks into the feasibility of expanding Apfo to include these other areas of infrastructure. There are, in 2005, there's 10 counties that have it. And on page 3, you can read my page 3. But this is serious that we should be able to consider it. And also, where's the planning board on this, recommendations?
Great.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I will hunt them up. They were on my desk today, so I'll make sure that we get them and make them available as part of this process.
Thank you.
Okay?
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cohn.
Thank you.
Chris Singleton, followed by Douglas Kornreich, Kristen Sachs, Lisa Markovitz, Diane Butler, John Taylor, Joe Duncan. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good morning, council members, Chairperson Siggety. I'm Christopher Singleton on Tucoya Drive in Ellicott City, and I'm a member of the Chateau Ridge Lake Community Association, but tonight I'm testifying as in my individual capacity. I support a lot of the effects of the submitted plan, noted in my incomplete review of it, and a lot of emphasis on mixed use and green development. A couple things that I noted needed strengthening, including bike-friendly development, opportunities for local businesses to grow here. An example of where that didn't work is the breadery, leaving the Route 40 corridor and going off to Baltimore County. On the other hand, an example of where it did work is the R&R Tuckadia coming into the Route 1 corridor, which is a good place for that. One of the things I'd like to testify about is support for well-planned densification along US 40. That work needs safe access to the neighboring communities, and it would be certainly benefit from a plan for a future. 2030 is a long ways from now, and by then there could be the density that would justify some sort of a metro link down 40. What I'd like to also do is try to encourage us protection against developing in an unplanned way and ending up with another Rockville Pike on 40 or US 1. Some of the other points that I picked up in my review, only 7.2% of the housing allocations of the plan are set for green neighborhoods. The only category with lower allocations is for the rural west. So you could read that we're trying to limit or restrict the creation of green neighborhoods. I do understand that the allocation has increased from the current allocation, but it's still pretty low. Policy 6.2 in the draft should explicitly include pedestrian and bike infrastructure under the implementing action A called infrastructure concurrency. I do understand that a bike master plan is underway, but I noted that MAP 7-1, key infrastructure improvements anticipated by 2025, doesn't include any bike corridor projects. If that bike master plan that's under development is supposed to have the same weight as the general plan, I think it would benefit from being stated in the plan that it's going to have the same weight. In the plan, a little bit farther down, you have project R107, US 1, Maryland 100 to PG County line. Doesn't note that it includes bike-friendly space. It should if it doesn't. Only one project in Figure 7.3, the road, bike, and pedestrian priorities includes the word bike. So a lot of things are being left for the master plan, and I'm going to have to submit some of these by email.
That would be really helpful, as I said to others, when you have specific recommendations and you've read a section with as close a detail as you have your eyes, and then putting it onto paper for us is a real help. So we do appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, Douglas Kornreich, Kristen Sachs, Lisa Markovitz. Good evening.
Evening. Morning.
It's still evening.
Okay, still evening.
It's a mindset.
We'll stop the clock.
It's a mindset.
My name is Douglas Kornreich. I live in Elkridge. My biggest concerns are with the Plan Howard sections on public facilities and services, Chapter 8. In particular, I'd like to address the concept of sustainable budgeting along with adequate public facilities. It's no secret that our current methodology for Apfo is not preventing regular overcrowding crises, at least in the eastern part of the county. Even with opening a new elementary school in Duckett's Lane, and even with the redistricting that is proposed, the other schools will still, in the area, will still remain overcrowded. And because of Duckett's Lane being planned, and because of the Oxford Square Middle School being planned, the area is now open to development, which means more houses are coming, more people are coming before these schools are even built. If Howard County is going to remain with the concept of closing areas to development, we can't actually reopen areas until schools are actually ready to accept students to alleviate the overcrowding. And in order for this to happen, we need to come up with a more reliable source of school construction funding. The HCPSS staff will tell you that they need to maintain a crisis situation so they can qualify for state funding for school construction. Waiting for state funds can delay relief for years, and with the current budget issues, state funding cannot even be considered reliable. And I understand that DPZ in the past has proposed increasing the real estate transfer tax by a small amount and dedicating that revenue to acquisition of land and schools. I would endorse that approach. We need to build up the funds so we can move quickly when construction is needed or land actually becomes available, which goes to one of the points in the plan. 8.8D talks about a land bank, but 8.8D, I'm sorry, it talks about a land bank, but doesn't talk about who is going to acquire the land. It just says acquire land. So I would propose you have the county executive actually acquiring land for a land bank without and whether it ultimately becomes a school or goes to a park or something else, you can work out. But waiting until we're doing a school is too late to find land. Furthermore, I propose we look at Montgomery County's method for school construction impact fees on new development. In the areas where schools are over 105% of capacity, new developers must pay an additional fee for construction of the new school facilities that will be built to accommodate the students that they are providing. By implementing this plan, you have sustainable budgeting, which would create powerful incentives for the developers to work with the county to keep those capacities below 105%, or if it doesn't, a quick funding method to get the construction done. These methodologies should be incorporated into the implementing actions for 8.8E. And then finally, I would address the policy 8.8C, implementing actions. Right now, that is minimize new school construction. That's an implementing action. Our elementary schools are too large and the high schools are too small, so our communities do not get to stay together. And so we need to change how we're building schools, so I'd maximize, not minimize schools. I'd remove that from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cornwright.
Mr. Cornwright, when we get to the part of the process where we deal with the Apfo changes, once the general plan is adopted, we'll have to deal with legislation to change Apfo. I encourage you to watch that process and be involved, and if there is a committee that they put together, I would encourage you to volunteer to be on it.
Okay, thank you.
Be careful, that's how I got my start.
You complain, you get drafted.
I'm Kirsten Sachs. I reside at 2944 Knowles Circle. Just for purposes of full disclosure, I reside in Normandy Heights, and our association president will be speaking for the association tonight, and I'm just speaking on my own behalf. Okay. I'm glad I followed Mr. Tillman, because I would like to just start with his remark about starting at a certain altitude of like 16,000 feet when he, in working on the plan. I'm more at like an elevation of about 75 or 100 feet, which I measure relative to the Normandy Shopping Center, which is an item that's been on your agenda and on our agenda in my neighborhood for a long time now. It was an issue going into the last general plan. So I don't know how long that makes it now, 10, 11, 12 years. And I see this plan as very similar in terms of what the philosophy it seems to show to the last plan. And I don't want to review what you guys probably know really well about the recent history of that. I just want to say that I have an interest in being green as much as I can in my lifestyle, and it really bothers me that it seems like, to me, that I'm going further and polluting more now to buy my groceries because maybe, and at least in my mind, the Safeway is closed in part because we don't have, because there was another alternative there in the minds of the Moxleys who own the Normandy Shopping Center, an alternative to keeping Safeway happy or getting another food store in there or even having a farmer's market. Another thing that I would like to see in a green community is if we are going to have much higher densities of people actually residing there, I don't think they're all going to be seniors, because I know that that's something that's a trend that gets played out from time to time, and there are vacancies, I think, very close to the shopping center in senior housing. I would like to see some thought given to what kind of environment you want physically. If you are going to have children living there, what's a high-density environment for children that is good for them? I haven't read the whole plan, I don't see the amenities there. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have more, we would very much appreciate you sending it in to us, okay?
Thank you.
All righty. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Lisa Markovitz, and I'm the president of the Normandy Heights Improvement Association and live in Normandy Drive in Honorable Ms. Watson's district. And we have some concerns about the goals that are expressed with regard to adding housing units and density in our neighborhood and in certain labeled growth areas in Plan Howard. If Plan Howard is adopted as the general plan for Howard County, you would need to follow those goals in comprehensive rezoning, which is coming up. And so we have concerns about how that would affect us and the labeled zones that we're being lumped in with. On page 14, map 3-1 of Howard County in the Plan Howard 2030, it shows on the north and northeast border of the county there by Patapsco Park is noted as having an environmental goal and label of being a watershed protected area. And much of the Route 40 corridor from Catonsville and then through even west of 29 is in that area, but is also being notated as a growth and revitalization zone in Plan Howard's charts of how many housing units to allow per year. And it seems like a contradiction that one would want to protect that watershed area from too much density, and then to lop that neighborhood, that very same neighborhood, into the highest growth zone that is being suggested in Plan Howard for the maximum amount of yearly housing density units to be provided per year for 20 years, which is 1,200 per year for 20 years. I also think that it is in congruity that area where our neighborhood is and along Route 40 where you have 50-plus-year-old single-family home neighborhoods that seem to be established to me, that we are widely surrounded in the maps there on page 70 and charts on page 73 of the Plan Howard as being surrounded by what is being labeled as an established community, which has a much lower yearly suggestion of housing increase units of 400, and yet you have these little blips of lopping us in, even though we're greatly surrounded by established community. There's this little blob of our neighborhood and portions of Route 40 that is being lumped in with the Route 1 area and downtown Columbia area to me, it seems ridiculous that these established single-family home neighborhoods in that corridor there would be combined with much more urban areas that could really sustain more of that level of increased density per year. Now, we're not against having growth in the county, we're not against having affordable housing in the county, but you have to do it in a careful way that you're not accelerating it by such an amount every year that, and we've heard this before, I agree with the HCAA comments and concerns about infrastructure. I mean, if the infrastructure in the area is just not able to keep up with that level of influx of people, then really the only way you can accomplish the goals and adopting these goals of Plan Howard for this zone in the limited amount of space that you have in that particular area of Route 40 is really just to change zoning laws. I mean, you're going to wind up having to raise height restrictions, minimize setbacks. I mean, our wishes and desires in our community with comprehensive rezoning coming up is to actually, we were, hoping to see some buffer zones for R20 to be, next to new apartments coming in and things like that. And instead, we're looking at these goals and thinking, wow, not only are we not going to get that, they're going to have to actually make it even worse, so to speak, for setbacks from us and for height restrictions. And, there are areas of Route 1 and downtown Columbia that can sustain maybe high-rise apartments in areas that are less single-family home neighborhoods, whereas we would be, greatly influenced by that. And it would not be sustaining the quality of life. It would really just be reducing it for everyone and not just bringing other people into our existing quality of life. And that's just kind of how we feel about the situation. We ask for you to just please not label us at that high of an intensity with those other places.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Diane Butler, John Taylor, Joe Duncan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Diane Butler, the president of the St. John's Community Association, which is the 1,000 homes that is south of Route 40 and east of 29. When I moved here in 2000, I went to a meeting about the widening of Route 29. The highway was supposed to be dug down lower to avoid noise for the surrounding existing neighborhoods. This did not happen. My yard would never pass a sound ordinance test, ever. For the last 10 years, we've waited for an extra lane on 29 where it's only 2 lanes. That has not happened. Smart growth and now Plan Maryland has held Howard County hostage to increased density beyond the infrastructure confines that we have in the county. As an example, Apfo and other stopgaps that now have no teeth. We do not have the roads for the growth predicted in Plan Howard 2030. We don't have the electrical reliability for the planned growth in the growth and revitalization areas and/or zones that are now planned. 1,200 new homes a year on the Route 40 corridor is a bit energetic, considering these concerns that are right there. I went to a pre-submission meeting 4 to 5 years ago for a 55 and up housing across from Longgate Shopping Center. The traffic was in failure before this development was approved. It was approved because 55 and ups don't drive very much. Now a new developer wants to put 44 townhomes, not 55 and up, right next to this development. And one of the reasons the developer used to justify this density was that the traffic is already in failure, so he now doesn't have to mitigate it. Please, this kind of growth is unacceptable. I've also served on 2 infill committees where we have barely gotten 20% of the things that the current homeowners needed for more development to be put in already developed neighborhoods, which are in your new growth and revitalization zones. Example, in this zone, we just got the new TNC zoning, and the builders don't want to honor the neighborhood protecting elements, just the increased density portions. Where are the safeguards for the existing older neighborhoods? I would like to see those in this plan. One of the other issues the existing neighborhoods have is stormwater management. A new utility charge for stormwater management will not alleviate the flooded homes and the yards that we currently have every time you put in the infill incorrectly. SJCA, the St. John's Community Association, feels that Apfo has been given short shrift. Example, we started planning for growth in the west, and now we're moving it back to the east, so we set up plans for schools out there, now we're bringing it back here, as well as the watershed protection areas. It seems like the plan is almost in conflict with itself at some points in time. We just don't, as an association, see the safeguards in this plan. Thank you very much for your time. I just want you to remember that we bought in beautiful Howard County, not New York City. At some point, enough is enough. Thank you.
Ms. Butler? I just want to clarify something you said. You said that Route 40 cannot take 1,200 homes a year. And I just want to make sure for the public, and I think Ms. Markowitz understood this, but I'm not sure that you had it correctly in your testimony, that the 1,200 homes per year in the general plan for the growth and revitalization areas includes the Route 1 corridor, the entire corridor, the Snowden River Parkway area, Maple Lawn, Emerson, Turf Valley, Waverly Woods, the Columbia Village Center, and Route 40. So
Right,
the
it's
1,200 homes a year is spread out among all of those areas and other areas. I want to make that clarification.
Right, I did understand that. It's just the way I wrote it, and I just didn't have the energy to redo it as I was sitting there talking. But it's still a lot for areas that are butting up against existing neighborhoods that are already there that have infrastructure issues already, especially electricity and traffic. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Taylor from Highland. You know, I have to say I'm not really impressed that you would take a topic this important, cram it on the end of a packed agenda, start the hearing at 10 o'clock at night, and keep us here until 12:30 at night with no end in sight. I would think you would have a little more consideration and respect for your constituents than to do this. You can do better than this, Mary. Now, that said, I think you should table this legislation and hold a proper set of public hearings where people aren't so tired that they can't think straight, and you're already falling apart as a council. This is not good. You should have done better than this. Now, with the last 2 minutes I have to address a 200-page document, let me say I don't think you should have increases in density. We're at the stops all through this whole region. My adult children took me out for Father's Day yesterday, and we sat in gridlock traffic on a Sunday afternoon on I-95, 495, and 295. It's a pipe dream to think of density bonuses and density increases. What are people smoking? We can't tolerate that. You need to go the opposite direction. You need to cap density. No extension of the planned service area, and certainly not in Clarksville. That should be off the table from the outset. That's insanity. This plan doesn't even have all the information in it. The Department of Planning and Zoning takes a map of the county that is subdivided into statistical planning areas. They know exactly in each of those areas what their growth projections are, 0 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20, for single-family, multifamily, apartments, whatever it is. They've got that all mapped out, and you know what? That's the real general plan. The rest of this is just rhetoric. Those tables need to be in this bill. They're part of Bill 26, and you have to have the council, the administration put those in. I always have to ask for those. I practically have to file a FOIA to get them. That's the real general plan. The rest of it is rhetoric. Delete any reference to the Economic Development Authority's plan. That's a business plan. It's a lobbyist's document. It has no place in a general plan for Howard County. They shouldn't be accorded that special status. Those are for-profit organizations. It's inappropriate to put their plan in our general plan. You should certainly prohibit any type of shared septics or package treatment systems. I would hope that Cattail Creek taught everybody that. You should eliminate the density exchange option altogether. I testified against that 20 years ago. What Mr. O'Leary said was entirely predictable that it would get overused. I've already said, please eliminate density bonuses. One of the things that I wanted to do that the Office of Law and I talked about back when Courtney and I were on the Adequate Public Facilities Commission together, for the cluster remainder lots, I'd like to see a requirement that 80, 85, 90% of those remainder parcels that don't go into agriculture go into forest conservation. You really need to table this and get a proper public hearing. This is not a way to do this.
Thank you. Joe Duncan?
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this late hour. My name is Joe Duncan, and I operate 2 business establishments in Howard County, one on US 1 in North Laurel. I support the continuation of revitalization of US 1. It's good for business. It's good for people who work and live there. As you know, the Howard County Master Plan calls for revitalization of the US 1 corridor, and properties are zoned to meet that goal. It provides that new construction should be aesthetically pleasing and provide needed services and products, meaningful employment, and modern residential accommodations. Now, this cannot be accomplished overnight. The last 10 years, we have made some progress, and we can continue to do so if we don't slip up and let things go wrong. Plan Howard has many good ideas and admirable goals and plans. However, just about everywhere I look, I see the words review, clarify, update, and particularly revise zoning and other regulations and make them more flexible. On the surface, it seems appropriate to refine our plans, make them better in order to more easily attain our goals. Truth is, making regulations more flexible in this case will open the gate for exceptions and more exceptions and a return to the old days when any development was better than no development. There is already a plan to request a zoning change on US 1 in North Laurel that violates the spirit of revitalization and the letter of revitalization policy. And under the current plan, it would not be allowed. That request is apparently on hold and will not be submitted, or likely will not be submitted until publication of the new plan, so as to gain that flexibility that the new plan will allow. If that zoning change is approved, it'll let the genie out of the bottle. There will be more requests and more requests that will be difficult to deny because you've let somebody do it and the others will expect the same treatment. And unfortunately, under those circumstances, revitalization will start a slow death. One other comment, please. If we're going to revise zoning regulations, I suggest that zoning regulations require a bona fide need for new development for which a zoning change is required, and that the proposed development meet the objectives of revitalization and those requirements be strictly enforced. Thank you very much.
Mr. Duncan, will you be providing your testimony to us in writing?
I do.
We have it, okay. Just one copy. Okay, great. All right, I am at the last page. I have 3 people on it. I have Sam Ashai, Alan Schneider, and Shun Liu. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairperson Segedi, members of the council. It's a great privilege to speak to you on behalf of Highland Business Association. It is an association of most business owners in Highland, if not all. The focus of my presentation will be to highlight the unique needs of Highland business owners. Highland is about 2 miles west from Clarksville and 1 mile away from Fulton. Businesses in Highland have to compete with Clarksville and Maple Lawn businesses. Since it's located on a major and busy crossroad and is only 2 miles away from Clarksville, Highland should not be lumped with Western Howard County. The general plan should take into account the unique needs of the businesses in Highland. Public water and sewer should be made available to these businesses. The current well water, septic, setback requirements, and state highway expansion make it impossible to develop current business lots, and most lots are small. Therefore, easing of restrictions makes sense. A case in point is there are 3 lots in Highland that have split zoning of B1 and RR. We believe that the split zoning by the county was a mistake. The economic activity and population has increased considerably in Highland since that zoning was given. It just makes good common sense to convert all these properties to B1. We believe consumers should be in the driver's seat, and economic activity should dictate the development of the business district in Highland. I thank you for your time. I know it's getting late. I'll leave a copy of my comments here.
Thank you, Mr. Ashai. Okay, Alan Schneider is gone. That leaves Shun Lu.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm glad I'm the last one. I will be very brief. Okay. My name is Shen Lu. My address is 12852 Macbeth Farm Lane, Clarksville. Okay. And I just want to ask you one question. When you are going to vote this bill?
This bill, under the current timeline, would be voted on July 2nd, but it will not likely be voted on July 2nd. We will table it for continued discussion through the month of July, and then we will determine what we're going to do with it at the end of July, whether or not we extend its life even longer or what we'll do with it.
Oh, good. Okay, because, the main purpose I came today is to just want to make sure that many of my neighbors and myself still have the time to send you our specific suggestions, because we have been involved in another public hearing that happened about the same time with this, like from the Department of Planning and Zoning open house up to now. So we have been exhausted and really don't have time to read this. We feel that we need time to study this carefully, thoroughly, in order to give specific, responsible, constructive suggestions.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So good. We do find some of the parts here need a little bit more clarification. For example, we try to figure out where is the PSA line for the Clarksville area. And many of our neighbors and I discussed about this, but we couldn't figure it out. So that's just one example. And any public hearings, for example, our public hearings are regarding conditional use. It can be very time-consuming and very costly, both for the residents and for the county. So we just want to, to have this opportunity, communicate with our council, and so that, we can come to something that can be more effective and save county and residents time, money, so that, everybody will be better. Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming, and I think you've been here for a while and heard me say earlier that the sooner you can get us the things, the considerations you want us to look at, the better it will be.
Yeah,
but
we
you
will
do
try.
have time.
Okay,
Okay?
great.
And
We will send online and click that you comments.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Bye-bye.
All right, that's everyone on the list. Is there anyone here who would like to have the last word? Nope, okay, then the last word has been had. Oh,
I need the last
That's
word.
right, you do.
I need to
remembered
read-
that.
I
We
need
have
to read one resolution.
Right.
of Housekeeping detail, Council Resolution 107, 2012. This is introduced by the Chair, a resolution calling the Howard County Council into legislative session, calling the County Council of Howard County, Maryland into legislative session on July 26, 2012.
And is there anybody here who would like to testify on Council Resolution Number 107? All right, with that, that's the last word. We appreciate everybody's time. I know it feels like we went for a very long time, but with so many people in the room, I wanted to give folks who had taken the time to come out the opportunity to speak. So thank you all for being with us.